Hey friends, I'm going to be doing a big book summer wrap-up. So these are going to be the books I read in June, July, and August. My big book summer was really only June and July, but I did some good reading in August and want to talk about it. So let's look at this. A lot of these books I don't own, so you might be getting a lot of this, and that's okay. The goal is ultimately to read my physical TBR, but I do feel like I made good progress in just continuing series, even if I don't have the next book. The first two books were holdovers. I had actually started them in like the last few days of May. Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. This is book number 3 in the first era of Mistborn. The ending of this, man, it's a roller coaster, and it's definitely not necessarily what you expect going into book 3, and yet it still makes sense, which is almost more frustrating for it to make so much sense and somehow not be what you thought it was going to be. I love Brandon Sanderson, so I don't know what else I could ask for out of an author that I'm not getting from this guy right here. My first audiobook in June was The Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune. I adored House on the Cerulean Sea and was looking for something similar. And so I went back to this author. I do think this had similar intentions and got close to reliving that comfort and found family joy that I felt in Cerulean Sea, but just didn't quite give me the same pleasure in reading. I think it was more of a 3-star than a 5-star that I was hoping for, but I do just again appreciate and have so much respect for TJ Klune as an author. Okay, look at me, another series completion. My next book was A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab. All of these books were supposed to be either over 500 pages or my audiobooks over 12 hours. I love these black, white, and red covers. Another really good series completion. There was one character that I wanted a little bit more for, but it still felt justified. It felt like everybody ended up where they were supposed to end up and who they were supposed to end up with, and I think that just really leads to a satisfying ending. I've always loved the magic that came with this world and learning about it even through the 3rd book. So my next audiobook was Outlive, The Science of Longevity. My dad recommended this, and I'm not gonna lie, I went into it thinking I was not gonna like it. I don't really do like self-help books, and nonfiction is not my main genre, but I definitely recommend this book if like healthy living is a thought in your mind, which sounds so general, but this book really focuses on the thoughts and goals of like, how do you want your last decade to look? It really talks about like, do you want to be able to carry groceries in by yourself, lift up your grandkids, go on walks in the park, and then what kinds of things do you need to focus on to still be able to do those no matter when your last decade is? How do you keep from being too frail or just dependent to do those basic living things? It also doesn't give super specific, like here's your steps, which I really appreciated. It gives a more of just like, here's the science, here's what we know, here's some things to focus on, whether it be grip strength or balance. It doesn't necessarily say, here's the 5 things you have to do to improve your balance or your nutrition, but it just kind of focuses, puts that into your mind to be a focus for the way you live now. I thought it was really well done. There were a few things that were hit or miss for me, but I enjoyed listening to this, was looking forward to listening to this, which is not typical for me as a mainly fantasy sci-fi reader. My next chunker, Empire of Storms by Sarah J. Maas. I've been putting this off forever because I have been scared about where this series was going, whether it would be a good finale. This is not the last book, but I just kind of have been holding off. I loved this. It had good romances, and the twist at the end, like I was not prepared to be just mind blown. I wasn't. I didn't think it was going to happen. I was pleasantly surprised. It got me excited to get back into this author. It got me excited to get back into this series and see how it concludes. I know some people give this author flack. I think there's a pretty big divide based on just like how much romance do you like in your fantasy? So it definitely is not for everyone, but I have enjoyed every book in this series. Some more than others, but still. All right, I feel like I was doing pretty well with my books, definitely getting a lot of ones that I was falling in love with. And so obviously that was not gonna last. I read Deep in Providence. It was a book club book, and I really love the book box subscription. So this does not equate to that in my mind. It's a subscription where you get like gifts on certain pages, and it's really fun. I like this book less the more I think about it. I knew this was going to be a challenging read, maybe not in the sense of like hard topics, which this definitely has hard topics in it, but just it was YA and magical realism, which are very iffy for me. When I love them, I love them. When I don't, I don't. And I feel like there were just some topics that could have been handled better, some relationships that were really well done, and some that I don't think were depicted well. And so I am going to donate this book. I have a little free library close to me that I'm going to be putting this. I started my next audiobook after that, which was The Fifth Elephant. This is part of the Guards Guard series in Terry Pratchett's Discworld. And like all of the others, it was wonderful. It was full of funny moments and real moments in a way that is hard to imagine that anyone else can achieve the way he does. I think this is the 5th book in the Guards Guard series and would probably be number 4 of 5 for me, but all of them have been either 4 or 5 stars, if that makes sense. Like the worst one was still a 4-star for me so far. I'm definitely looking forward to continuing on in Discworld. I have the rest of the Guards books and the Death series on these shelves, so they will certainly be continuing to pop up. Okay, I started The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie in June and finished it like the 2nd day of July. I was so curious how I feel about this book because it is like grimdark through and through from what I've heard, and maybe the series as a whole is grimdark through and through. It's definitely had those dark vibes in there, but I really loved it. There were a few characters that surprised me. I feel like I've heard a lot about Glokta and maybe expected someone more lovable than what I found in these pages, but I will absolutely be continuing on with this series. It was a good start to a series, and it was on my 2023 goal list to start this series. So I know I've been talking about finishing or making progress in series, but this was an exemption. If you're keeping track, I doubt anyone actually is other than me, but I went for a nonfiction audiobook next, and that was Aloha Wonderwall. This was part of Libro FM's educator series, and it's about a girl who went off at like 16 to become a worldwide traveler. There are a lot of things she did that were just insane. Driving through jungles, the first time anyone has ever driven through this jungle, talking to people around the world, just promoting this wild band of adventures. And so learning about her life was just crazy. I don't think the writing in this book did it justice. It was very one note. It just was like, here's what was next, and this was next, and this was next, and this was next. And I felt like it really downplayed, maybe not intentionally, but the grand scale of these adventures. Aloha Wonderwall lived a crazy life. So, you know, it would not be a big book summer without Wheel of Time. So this was book number 10. I did some beautiful tabs. Not color-coded this time. It was just whatever colors I had left lying around, which will probably come back to bite me one day if I ever decide to reread these. I don't know that I can see myself doing that though, to be honest. But maybe by the time season 10 comes out in Wheel of Time, I'll want to go back and look at my tabs. Who knows? There are only 4 books left in this series, and I still am enjoying it. It took me 10 days to read this, which I think is pretty good. And that kind of just tells me that I was enjoying this as much as I have any other books. Okay, I did have a little break built into this system. So I read The 11th Hour, which is a graphic novel based on D&D. I love it. I love the art style. I love the storyline. I love the characters. As I mentioned, I was very much looking forward to more Sarah J. Maas at this point. So I picked up A Court of Wings and Ruin. I love Rhysand and Feyre. I am not Team Tamlin, but I almost feel like their relationship may be too perfect, and I'm again starting to get a little bit worried about the next few books. But for this book, it was beautiful, wonderful, enjoyable, everything I needed out of fantasy romance that I got. So I loved the war that came and the way they conquered it, and the sisters, getting to see more of them and how their story is evolving was really fun. In a sad, dark way maybe, but still I enjoyed the introduction of those characters. Okay, towards the end of July, I started The Rose and the Dagger on my Kindle. This is a duology, and one of my goals was to finish book 2. There are only 2 books, and yet somehow it has been like 5 years since I finished the series, and I definitely waited too long. It was a good series, but I think I've just read other fantasy romance between the first book and the last book of this, and they felt a little bit stronger than what I was getting from this book. I'm glad I finished the series. It was still a really good read. Happy to have book number 1 on my shelves, but probably won't pick up book number 2. I did pick up Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This is his YA space pilot series. Is that what we're calling it? I don't know. So angsty, and still very good. I was hesitant at the beginning. The characters seemed maybe a little bit too one note, but I enjoyed the way it went once she started the school. I've heard mixed things about the rest of the series, but I am having faith in Brandon Sanderson and will continue on. I picked up Fourth Wing as an audiobook because it has been everywhere and I just needed to know. And again, fantasy romance was something I'm diving back into. I loved it. I since then have learned that this is going to be like a 5-book series, and heard the theory that maybe Xaden is going to be a Tamlin, and that kind of breaks my heart. But love the dragons in this, love the school in this, love the challenges in this, loved the main character. And I'm really glad that like I bought into the hype. I think I did it in the right time for me to really enjoy it as a book. And if you like fantasy romance, I would recommend buying into the hype because I feel like this fits the bill perfectly and belongs in that genre, you know, just is what it is unapologetically. Another series to check off, 5 Dark Fates. This is the last book in a series by Kendare Blake. I don't know what the series is called, but it starts with 3 Dark Crowns. I loved book 1, liked the middle of the series, it felt pretty strong, was not as big of a fan of the ending. I feel like there was a character that I liked less and less who became more and more popular, and it was kind of like a Bran Stark moment where they ended up being the chosen one and I didn't want them to be. So I feel like that took away a lot from the rest of the series for me, but I still, again, really enjoyed the series and will absolutely keep it on my shelf. I think it is worth a read still because maybe you won't have as much against this character as I did. I don't even think I had anything against them. I just did not see them as the end-all be-all per se. I picked up We Hunt the Flame, which I love the cover. This was very unique and was a nice break while still getting to read fantasy. It is kind of a quest journey to find an item to bring back magic. Has, again, angsty characters, which has also maybe been a sub-theme for this summer. There were times where it seemed to kind of skip ahead or just kind of move past something that felt like obviously an author's choice or writing style, but sometimes I was like, I would not have just let that go as a person, so I'm surprised the character just let that go. And yet they were moving on, mainly in the name of the quest, which makes sense. But I think that's my only qualm with this. It's definitely going in my top books of 2023. And the last book I read or listened to this summer was Bryony and the Roses by T. Kingfisher. I read Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher and really enjoyed the dark take on a fairy tale. She does a really great job of slowly meandering through, tying in these dark moments, and still feeling wholesome somehow. And it doesn't feel slow. You can tell like it is slow, but it doesn't feel slow. It's dark, but it doesn't feel too dark. It really is such beautiful writing, and I'm so excited to keep reading this author. She's definitely one you're gonna see popping up more as the year goes on, because I'm 2 for 2 for books by T. Kingfisher. So there is no way I can hold up that whole stack. So you're just gonna get a little view of the last few books I read. I hope you had a great summer. If you did like the Aurelian readathon or the Tropical readathon, which I did and just realized I didn't even talk about in this video, but it is what it is at this point. I hope you had a fun time. Those readathons are always amazing. I will see y'all later. Bye, friends.